Welcome to this instant reaction edition of the Man with the Plan podcast. I'm Grayson Mann. This is episode 162 and part one of either 4 or 7 within that number of our NBA Finals instant reaction series. We're going to be doing this throughout the week. We'll have super regional reactions. I'll be live there working the game back in the press box. We'll have more on that later. But today it's the NBA Finals reaction. Boston Celtics take down the Dallas Mavericks to advance to 1-0 on the series. 107-89. Dallas got it as close to 8, but in the end, Boston controlled the game mostly throughout this game. And I think for me, the key for this series, both of these teams coming off of at least a week of rest, Dallas winning in 5, Boston sweeping Indiana. It was, okay, the storylines of this series, it was so fascinating going into it. Kyrie Irving in Boston, Kristaps Porzingis facing his old team, Luka Doncic in his first NBA Finals, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown getting a second chance at life to get a banner 18 for the Celtics. There's so much to go into it, so I want to dive into 3 specific categories that I thought really stood out to me. We're going to talk about Kristaps Porzingis' return, 20 points in, I think, about 25 minutes. I can check that real quick. Kristaps Porzingis 21 minutes and 20 points with a plus 13 rating. We'll start there with Porzingis. So the big storyline, or one of them this week, we talked about storylines, I think, seconds ago. But one of them was Kristaps Porzingis' return. He injured his calf in Game 4. It was a similar injury that Giannis Antetokounmpo had. And I think, ironically enough, they were playing Boston when it happened. Giannis missed the entire Pacers series. Porzingis missed the Cleveland Cavaliers series and the series against Indiana in the Eastern Conference Finals. And it was announced about 2 days ago that he was for sure going to play. Just what capacity? Would there be a minutes restriction? How would he look conditioning wise? Was it going to be a feel it out kind of game where he wasn't going to be as dominant, but you could maybe see in game 2 or 3 start to come back to form? No, it was immediate. Porzingis had 11 points in the first quarter alone. You could easily see he was taking advantage of matchups. It was on Derek Jones, Derek Lively, who he was picking on people on the floor. Kyrie Irving. It's just the height advantage, the mid-range game for him. It evolves, and it really, for Porzingis, it's all volume. So if he starts making those, he starts making dunks, it gives him the confidence to take those 30-foot three-pointers that we saw in this game as well. When Porzingis is healthy for the Celtics team, and this is exactly why Boston pulled the trigger to go grab him in the offseason, it stretches the floor, and it makes where Dallas in these last 2 series, they've had to sort of use Gafford and Lively, their big man duo, that and Gafford they acquired over the offseason, or acquired over the trade deadline, and Derek Lively over the offseason. They've been able to sort of, with Gobert in the Timberwolves series and Josh Giddey, both not very well known for three-point efficiency for various reasons. You could sort of put them in the dunker spot. You can put them in the paint for them to roam around, and it sort of contributes to, okay, Anthony Edwards, he likes to drive. He's a slasher. Cuts that off completely, or makes it more difficult to be able to score on that, with Lively and Gafford being such great rim protectors. In that series, you had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander likes to drive and get to the line, cuts that efficiency off because they don't have to necessarily hone in on Josh Giddey and stretch out to the outside of the key. But with Porzingis there, it's everyone. Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and now Porzingis. Al Horford, to an extent, on an occasional game, he's due for a good night, but normally you don't have to worry about him as much as the other 4. But Porzingis is just as deadly as a three-point shooter. I think he was 41% from three-point land in the regular season. He had a great game 1 against Miami, and you saw the effect almost immediately. It draws so much attention. It leaves guys like Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and we'll get into the Jays in a second. But Porzingis' impact on the defensive end, he creates such an uncomfort inside, and I think he ended up with 3 blocks and no turnovers for him. Very efficient defensive night. Just completely makes it changes elements of offense for Boston and makes them a much stronger defensive team just within that rim protection aspect. And it really made it for Dallas that it has to be all on Luka and Kyrie in certain stints, where Doncic had, I believe, 30 points tonight. He was really incredible in certain stretches. His knee looked a little bit hurt. That may be something to monitor. There's that injury situation with the Celtics and the playoff run they've had this year. But another thing that I would love to touch on is Dallas within the third quarter, you could see they went on a 13-5 run to end the half. And you thought, okay, what's this going to look like outside the third quarter? Because Boston came out with energy. Al Horford said after game four they were starving for an opportunity like this, and it certainly looked like it. And they were the more intense team. They were the more locked in team defensively, and it translated into easy turnovers and baskets. Jaylen Brown, Derek White, Drew Holiday were all poking at Doncic and Irving and making life extremely uncomfortable for them and making them work on the defensive end. You could see it in stints. Luka was a little tired, and it resulted in bad shots offensively. Not that he takes many, but you have to take those when if you're a Celtics fan. So when it came to that stretch for Dallas, they started to tighten their grip. They're no strangers to comebacks. They did it against the Timberwolves. They did it against the Clippers. They may be a game where they came back against the Thunder. Wasn't as locked in on that series, but comebacks in the postseason for them, this is an anomaly. This is something they've done before. And the second it got to about 8 with 4 minutes to go, there's a sequence I'd love to highlight here. So with let's see here, 4:28, Luka Doncic makes a 27-foot three-pointer, timeout Boston, and it gets very tight. Crowd's a little anxious there, and you immediately have Jaylen Brown getting to the line. You immediately have Jason Tatum getting an offensive board off a Porzingis miss. Porzingis then catches in the dunk, 11-point game. Jaylen Brown off of a Derek Lively shooting foul. He misses both free throws. Then you have Jaylen Brown getting to the line and making 2 for him, and you just have this sense here. And in 2022, the biggest criticism for the Celtics was the maturity of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And especially when it came to Jason Tatum, the moment looked too bright on occasions for him. And I think that's a fair criticism, is sometimes in the playoffs, we've seen the moment be a little too big, or there was a little too much ISO ball happening, and they weren't getting into their sets right. And so for Boston, it was, okay, what's going to happen here? This is a series. I think it would have been more series defining if Dallas had made the comeback versus whether Boston held on like they did and blew out Dallas. But it became Dallas might be able to steal game one here when Boston was originally up 29, to where they only won the quarter, and they only won the third quarter by a point, and Boston goes on to win by 22, I believe, or my math's crazy off, 18. Math is hard, ladies and gentlemen. But for Tatum, who had 16 points in the night, 6 of 16, not the best shooting wise, but he had a block, he had 5 assists, 11 rebounds, doing the little things. I think Tatum's best development in the last 2 years has been his playmaking, especially when it comes to trying not to do everything himself, realizing his co-star in Jaylen Brown is very capable, who had 22 points tonight, led all scorers on the Celtics. He had a plus minus of 12. I was feeding into Jaylen Brown. He was feeding into Horford in the corner. He was allowing Drew Holiday to get to work. All Celtics starters recorded over double digits. It really is the culmination of the Jays maturing and having the pieces around that complement them so well. And you saw it in full thing. Porzingis plus 13, Drew Holiday plus 20, Jason Tatum plus 19, Derek White plus 3. Not the best defensive night for him. I believe he had three personal fouls that you'd love to have back if you're Boston. But I think overall for Boston, it's that stretch in the third quarter you'd love to clean up. But overall, I think you're in a great spot up 1-0. Dallas, I think you're going to need more from a role player. You're certainly going to need more from Kyrie Irving, who was 0 of 5 from 3 tonight, 12 points, a minus 19 in 37 minutes. Boston did a really good job of switching onto Irving and making him as uncomfortable as possible. Irving and Doncic, I think they're going to be examples throughout this series, and sort of how I think this is going to go. I think game 2, you're going to see Doncic and Irving a little more comfortable. Not that Doncic at times looked uncomfortable because he had dropped 30 points, but you're going to see more an assertiveness from Dallas. You get punched in the mouth in game 1. How do you respond and take that back? So I think game 2 is going to be a little more contested in that sense, and that I don't think we're going to see Boston lead by 29 at any point. I think it's going to be very back and forth, almost of the similarity of game 4 with Dallas and Minnesota, where it's very back and forth, and it's just going to come down to the best 4 players on this court: Kyrie, Luka, Jason, and Jaylen. Who's going to make the big play out of those 4? And it'll determine whether Boston goes up 2-0 or Dallas ties this at 1-1. One final note I'd love to add from Boston: they got some production off the bench with minus the Porzingis effect. Obviously, they got 8 points out of Sam Hauser, and I think he's certainly a player to watch in terms of that extra guy, him and Peyton Pritchard off of Boston's bench. We already know what the top six for Boston looks like in terms of efficiency and production. But if they start to get production out of their 7 and 8, they get 8 from Pritchard or a 10 from Hauser, I think it starts to really add pressure onto Dallas, because when you look at it top to bottom, in terms of Dallas's bench, you only got 2 from Kleba, you only got 2 from Derek Lively, and some of those points for the bench for Dallas came in garbage time when the game was already decided. So Dallas is going to need some effort, whether it's PJ Washington coming alive like he did against OKC, or you have Gafford dominating inside. Dallas's work is certainly cut out for him, but I feel like we knew that going into this. It's going to be the star power of Irving and Doncic that's going to seriously determine this. If we have another Kyrie Irving game where it's 0-5, I would probably take Boston in a heartbeat in game 2. My mind, I lean Dallas game 2 just because of the home history that the Celtics have and the urgency of this series. I think it's going to be very back and forth. I think just Boston felt with the second chance at a title with this group and the urgency at home, they needed to come out and be strong. Boston's up 1-0, and that was our instant reaction of the NBA Finals Game 1. Hope you guys enjoyed episode 162 of the Man with the Plan podcast in part 1, I guess, per se, of our finals reaction. Guys, take care. Let me know if we should go live after one of these games. It'd be really fun to have call-ins. I wanted to shout out Armani Garcia real quick, one of my close friends who's given me some great ideas and has some real enthusiasm for this series. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. Subscribe for more. Help us reach 35,000 listeners, and stay tuned for more on the way. Have a great day and take care.